everyone. Welcome to another video. It's Katie's Shelf Life. Today we're doing our January reading wrap-up. It is January 27th. It is Friday. I'm in my work clothes still, and this was the best time to film it, even though the lighting is garbage right now. Normally I would keep reading books for my month, like I would just let them carry into February and be like, whatever, and I'll count it for a February read if I start it in the end of January and I don't finish it. But I really wanted to be able to do this video a little earlier than normal, like record it at least, because I just I'm not able to really film these longer things during the work week right now. I'm doing the January wrap up now. I am going to keep reading books, obviously, for the rest of the month, but I'm focusing mainly on like continuing reading my Outlander series because I'm on book 5. I read it very slowly and I've kind of put it down for a few months, and I want to pick that up for the rest of the month and read that before I jump into my reads for February. We're going to talk about a book I DNF'd because I actually did DNF one book this month. We're going to talk about the books that I read for Backlog January, my overall feelings around Backlog January, and the books that I read after I finished those 5 books that were part of Backlog January, and the difference that I noticed between having a TBR and not having a TBR. We're not going to be surprised where this goes, but we're going to talk about it anyways. Let's start with the DNF. So my DNF for this month was the complete stories of Leonora and Carrington. Leonora Carrington is a British Mexican surrealist painter. She passed away fairly recently, actually, and she was one of the last surviving painters from the surrealist movement. She's got a really interesting history and story, and this isn't the place to get into it all, but I need to be focused. I did DNF this, not because I don't like it or wasn't enjoying my time with it. I just was not in the mood for short stories. I just wasn't getting invested enough. They were really weird. I like weird and surreal and creepy, but everything just wasn't hitting the mark for me. There was something lacking in every story. I know that's the thing with short stories, is that it's not going to be this neatly wrapped up story. Not everything's going to be resolved, and I have no issue with that. It's just, I just wasn't in the mood for it, and maybe I'll go back to it one day. Maybe it's one of those things that I'll pick up and read here and there. I didn't get too far into it, but honestly, I was reading other books at the same time that I was reading this, and I was finishing those books and not picking this up, and that just kind of told me that I just didn't need to force it. So I did DNF this book. Not that it is bad or I wasn't loving it or anything like that. It's just, it wasn't the time. And I'm learning how to be able to tell when something is the time and when it's not the time. I am going to do this kind of in order from least favorite, so the DNF, to favorite reads. Not that any of these are bad. It's just my way of deciding like what I enjoyed the most. So the next book for me would be Rat Rule 79 by Rivka Galchen. This is a middle grade children's book. I talk about it in one of my Backlog January videos, which I will post somewhere up here in the cards. I read it along with the next book that we're going to talk about, but I enjoyed this book because I was really interested in this story. It's of a mother and daughter. The mother sort of goes through this portal and the daughter follows after her. After like a fight, they move around a lot, and the daughter is just about to have her birthday, and she's just feeling like, why bother having a birthday party? She feels very out of control of her life. Like, she's never asked if moving around is what she wants. It's just her mother just decides, because she's a professor, that they're going to be moving to all these different places. And the daughter just goes along with it, and she's kind of just fed up and is like, I don't want to have a birthday. They get into a fight. She sees the mother going through the portal, and the daughter, Fred, that's her name, Fred, follows her in. She runs into a whole cast of characters. There's elephants, a talking elephant, just this whole great cast of characters. It's very Alice in Wonderland. It's very Phantom Tollbooth. They go through the land of impossibility, and it is illegal to celebrate a birthday, to talk about birthdays, to do anything around that sort of celebration, because children are revered and should never grow up. It's great. I think that if you have a child who is, 8 to 10 or 12, this would be a great book for them. I think it'd be really fun to read together. Y'all, people around here get their lawns done every day, all day long. I don't understand. Do I keep filming? Do I keep doing this? There is something that I did notice between this and Miss Ice Sandwich by Mieko Kawakami, which is the next book that I also read in tandem with this one for the first Backlog January vlog, somewhere up here. I liked this one a lot more. Both of these books are from child narrators, which I typically do not gravitate towards, and I will tell you why in just a second. I'm so sorry about the lawn. I don't have it in me to stop and start this again, y'all. I just don't. Miss Ice Sandwich. It is translated from the Japanese by Louise Heal Kawai. We follow an unnamed narrator, a young boy, and he is completely infatuated by the woman at the grocery store who puts your sandwich order into a bag, Miss Ice Sandwich, and gives them to the customer. And he's infatuated with her from a distance. He's never really talked to her besides the social interaction of getting a sandwich from her. We follow the narrator kind of just telling us about his daily life. He has one friend that he never really interacts with, his other friend who's a girl named Tootie, and they're the really only two other characters that are kind of in the book. We get a little bit of his mother, who is kind of absent, like she's around, but she's a little bit absent. She runs like a salon from the home, and they live with the grandmother who the home belongs to her. And the grandmother is bedridden for the most part. She's ill, and the boy does spend a lot of time just talking to her. His father passed away when he was very young, and we don't know anything else besides that. He is a very interior character. If you want more in-depth on that, I will put that video up there where I really talk about it, but he is definitely coded as being neurodivergent. He does not completely understand a lot of social cues that others find very normal and just everyday. He really struggles with them and understanding them, and just the way he associates with the world around him is very different from others. And this book was very tender, it was very sweet, it was very short. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't like mind-blowing, but it was very sweet. It was lovely to read a character who is coded as neurodivergent. And it was written with a lot of tenderness, which I really, really appreciated. But I will say this about these two books. I do not love reading child narrators. There's nothing wrong with child narrators. I just don't always gravitate towards that style of writing or perspective. And I figured out why. It's not that these books were not enjoyable. This one was more enjoyable than this one, which I've said. But I prefer, and I'm going to use my typical reference for a lot of things, but I prefer in the style of Elena Ferrante's My Brilliant Friend. I will never shut up about that book, and here is why. My Brilliant Friend is told from a child's perspective. Two children, kind of, but mainly from Elena's perspective. The authors are adults, and they're narrating and remembering their childhood. And there's something that I really, really love about, as an adult, or writing when you're an adult a novel and looking back on your life. I love the perspective and memory that you're able to have about certain things. In these cases, they're telling us exactly how things are happening. They're written in a very childlike way, and but the sentences are just a lot more simplified. They're very straightforward. And I just love that when an author is writing about their childhood and remembering their childhood, they're writing as an adult and they're remembering as an adult and what that moment in their childhood, what the impression was upon them and how it has carried throughout their life, like how they have carried that memory. And memory shifts and memory changes, and we create things and we change things. And there's just something that I really love about that style of storytelling. So this is The Harpy by Megan Hunter. I did do a reading vlog for this book up somewhere here. It was the only book that I read during that reading vlog, so I feel like I definitely go a lot more in depth than that. But basically we follow a married couple, Lucy and Jack. They have two sons, Ted and Patty. We start with our narrator, Lucy, basically finding out that her husband has cheated on her with an older woman. She's kind of taken by surprise by it because she has devoted her adult life to being a good wife, a good mother. She is okay having sacrificed her career to do these things because she thought it's what needed to happen for the overall benefit of the family. She just can't seem to forgive him. She can't really get past it. And the husband says, there's an incident that happens and he says, you need to punish me, don't you, in order for you to forgive me. And she's kind of confused, and he says, I'll allow you to punish me 3 times in any way that you want, and you don't have to warn me, you don't have to tell me anything, like they just are going to happen to me. But after the 3, we move on and we stay a family and we work through this. I thought it was going to be like a typical scorned woman, DWM, marriage story, like that kind of typical book, and it wasn't that at all. It definitely had a lot more to it. The mythology behind it was really interesting. Lucy starts to tell us about her obsession with the Harpy and how not only was it something that she was obsessed with as a child, as like a coping mechanism for some trauma between her parents, she becomes obsessed. She studies the Harpy, she writes papers on the Harpies. I don't really feel that this book, the plot is super important. Like it was good, at times a little predictable, but what was really special about this book is the writing. The writing is phenomenal. It was great. If you just want to read something for really wonderful sentences, I highly recommend this book. So let's do this next book. I just finished this a few days ago. It is In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire. This is part of the Wayward children's series. This is book 4. So I won't go a ton into it. I talk about it briefly in my 23 books in 2023 post that I did. But in this particular one, we follow a character named Catherine. So we meet Catherine, our main character, in the 60s. And she is very much a 10-year-old young girl of the 60s. She is aware of where her life is going in regards to being a housewife, to being a mom, to just keeping a home. She understands that that is what she is heading towards. And she accepts it, but fights it. She is very much in her head. She is always with a book. She prefers not having friends. Her dad is the principal of the school and no one really wants to be her friend. And she's kind of okay with that. She'd rather spend time with her books and being by herself. I love that her name is Catherine. She spells it my way because I related to her so much. So we meet her when she's 10 and she's walking one day and a tree appears with a door and she goes through and she ends up in this other world called the Goblin Market. Everything has a price and you do not give your name. So she creates this name for herself. Well, she doesn't create it. It's a family name, Lundy. She befriends a girl named Moon, teaches her the ways of living in this world. She eventually makes her way back to the real world and discovers a family secret, is sent away to boarding school, and she finds the door again. She leaves for a few years before returning home for hopefully the last time. And her father bargains with her on this. And there are consequences to the decisions that she makes in the real world and in the Goblin Market. And she must decide if she wants to make that her permanent home by the time she is 18. And she is battling that so hard because she knows that there is no future for her in the real world, has responsibilities somewhere else. She belongs in a world somewhere else where she can be her own person, and there are no expectations that she doesn't want to meet placed upon her. And she knows how to bargain, she knows how to make deals, she knows how to do the right thing. And she goes back, and there are some things that you just can't outrun, and you can't outbargain, and you can't outsmart. That's what's so great about these books, is that they're clever, they're always entertaining. Every world is unique, every story and every person in it is special because every single one of them has a backstory. And they're not always just going through these portals just like, that looks fun. There's always something deeper within them that is making them go. Some of them are extremely sad. The time that they're in, like Catherine, is just, she doesn't see a future for herself. And that's difficult in its own way. But my favorite books that I read this month are no surprise. Well, one of them won't be a surprise. One might be a surprise because I didn't do a vlog about it. But one that I did do a vlog of was Too Much and Not the Mood by Durga Chew-Bose. This is an essay collection. I marked it up to the high heavens. It is all marked up everywhere. I will post the vlog for this because I feel like I did a really good job explaining some things, and I went into a lot more detail about specific stories within it that I personally felt connected to. So I will leave that there, and I highly recommend watching that because I just really enjoyed that vlog. I enjoyed making it. I really loved reading this, so I feel like I had a lot to say, and I just feel good about that one. So Durga is from Canada. She is a first generation Canadian. Her parents moved from Calcutta, India. She is a woman of color, so a lot of these stories are very much focused on what that experience is like as being a first generation and woman of color. So my two favorite essays, which I've talked about ad nauseum in my vlog, is Heart Museum and Since Living Alone. Those two essays are 5-star essays. I would say all of these essays are 4-star, if not 5-star, but those two are great. The best essays I read. I won't go into detail about those. You can tell that she's very much in love with the small moments of life. And she intertwines art, movies, different media, pop culture that she grew up with, but that is also present in her life now. And she connects everything in a really lovely way. These essays are so much more. They are so much about her experience growing up, of her comparing herself to other girls in high school and growing up and being different and wanting to not be different, and then what that's like as an adult looking back. And yeah, these are great. I definitely think these are essays that I will go back and revisit. Yeah, if you read any essay in this, the first essay, Heart Museum, it's like 90 pages long, but that is the essay that I would say, if you choose to pick this up, that is the one essay I say you must read. And if you don't read any others, that's fine. I'm sorry that you won't, because I think you should, but I think that essay is just so important. And if you're on BookTube, not to generalize, but if you are on BookTube or you're watching BookTube, I have a feeling you might be a Nook person, just a hunch. So I say pick this up. Okay, so is that better? Let's do that. We'll just do this for the last video because it's getting very dark. Okay, so this is the last book. Wow. I loved it. It was Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. I've never read Jhumpa Lahiri before. That is my mistake. I will definitely be picking up a lot more of her books, but this is really interesting. This book was written in Italian, and she translated it into English herself. She translates a lot of books that were written in Italian into English and a lot of English books into Italian, but she translated her own book, which is total badass. I really love this book, and here's why. Because this book, once again, follows an unnamed narrator in an unnamed city, and that's my meat and potatoes. I love that way of storytelling. So we follow our unnamed narrator for like a span of a year. We're pretty sure she lives in some Italian city, but is unnamed. We follow her from place to place, coffee shops, museums, piazzas, her apartment, as she navigates and questions her place in the world. That's basically all that happens. There is no plot. We are just getting little moments of her life. But this novel feels subtle, like the shifting of light on a warm wood floor. The narrator never fully allows herself to occupy a space that is not her apartment. I find that just really interesting. Like, she's just constantly giving us these little pieces and kind of telling us a bit about herself by her observations within those spaces, but never telling us too much about her. There's one instance where she's in a museum that she frequents pretty regularly, and she's just sitting and observing. She knows what pieces are where. She knows the layout of the room. She is comfortable in that space. And she sees a woman she does not know, but already has created feelings and an idea of who and how this woman is. She sees the woman stretch out on a bench in the museum and closes her eyes. And our narrator, she's not angry, she just does not like it. And this is what she says. She goes on to think, that's how she manages to fully inhabit and possess this room, crossing a certain threshold I've always respected. the spaces she is just in. She doesn't feel that the space belongs to her. She doesn't treat it as if it belongs to her. She treats it as, this is a space that I'm just in at this moment. But when she's in her own home, in her apartment, which is messy, and she moves around and just is herself in and loves being on her balcony, like, she is a different person. And just that little moment was just really interesting. And not only does she keep a distance between herself and spaces that she's in, she keeps a distance between herself and others. She seems to always be looking from the outside in. She's always outside others' lives or spaces. So she creates this distance from people, being together but apart, comfortably separate. I loved how short each chapter was. You get just a glimpse into a world or like a moment taken from a journal. The chapters are really short. It does feel very journal-like at times. I know it's not, it's how it felt, because each chapter starts with on, in, or at, and simple places, and they are like places that we all inhabit, very simple places we all inhabit regularly. So on the street, at my house, in my head. These are all like at the piazza, at the, like, they're just all very normal, at the coffee shop. Like, these are just all things that we do and we all experience. And that's what I loved about this book as well. These are all human things. We all go and do these things. We're all on, in, or at these normal places doing these normal things. And that's what I really loved about it, because I felt like when I was reading this, it's like, oh, I'm not reading like a novel, and it's fiction. Like, I know it's fiction, but while I was reading it, I was like, I can inject myself into this, because I have had a moment on the street. I can tell you about a moment on the street. In spring, I can tell you about a memory in the spring, or a moment I'm having in the spring. In the sun, at my house, in August, at the cash register. So this is all a year of time for her that she is telling us about. And they're just these little glimpses of moments within that year. And I think it'd be really interesting to sort of take this and write in this way, like journal entries, like in the office, at my job. Like, I don't know, there's just something really unique about this. Like, I feel like I'm not doing a very good job. The writing is beautiful. I had heard really good things about this book, but I'm really happy that I picked it up when I did. It was a really great weekend read last weekend. It just felt like the right book, and I really liked it. I think the more I talk about it, I'm still trying to process it here with you, but like the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, I'm going to probably have this book be in my favorites at the end of the year. I really, really believe that. There's no plot. It's just a life and the places we interact with and make up our lives and lived experiences. And that's kind of, at the end of the day, all I want to keep reading about. So I love this book. This is like an hour so far. I'm gonna have to cut this down to like 20 minutes. Good luck to future me. So as we've been sitting here, it's basically dark, but I wanted to quickly talk about something. So the books that I read for Backlog January, these 5 books right here. And I DNF'd one. I was okay with one. I liked one. I definitely liked one, and I loved one. And here's my conclusion. I'm very glad that I read these books, because they were books that have been sitting on my shelf for a very long time. I'm very glad that I picked these up and that I read them, and I finally could stop staring at them and they could stop staring at me. However, making a set TBR is not for me. When I was finished with these books, while I loved one of them and I really enjoyed another, I picked up this because I just felt like it. It wasn't on a TBR. It wasn't part of Backlog January. It was just, I wanted to pick this up and I loved it. So for me, a TBR can be kind of fun, but it is very constricting. I am 100% a mood reader. I am not a TBR, so you will not be getting monthly TBR videos from me. I am very much a mood reader. And I'm glad that I did this because it kind of got that whole, oh, I should do a monthly TBR. It kind of got that itch out of my system. I will not be doing a monthly TBR. And I am very happy that I did Backlog January. I think it was a great way for me to realize that I don't constantly need to buy new books, or I can buy new books, but I don't constantly need to buy new releases that are being buzzed about. I can really focus on what's on my shelf and, you know, care and love the books that have been there for a while. If you want to chat more about one of these, message me, because if I didn't make sense telling you about it, yeah, send me a message. I will end this video now, and I want to say, yeah, thanks for being here. Remember to take care of yourself and always be kind, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.